What up, what up, what up, what up? On a Wednesday, on a hump day Wednesday. What's going on with you, Coop? How you doing, sir?
What's going on? How are you, man?
I'm doing great, man. We plan to do our hump day midday wrap up and failed to realize that it was gonna fall on September 29th. September 29th is a historic release month. I mean not month, date back in 1998. Aquemini dropped, Jay-Z dropped Volume 2. Black Star dropped, Most Def and Talib presents Black Star. Tribe Called Quest released The Love Movement, which was marketed as their final album, so that was a big deal. Brand Nubian released The Foundation. I think Gangsta Boo released her debut album, Inquiring Minds. Am I missing anything?
Best release day ever.
It's one of the best release dates ever. When you talk about in mass and the fact that, in my opinion, the greatest hip hop album ever made was released. That's Outkast's third effort, Aquemini. I think that on Aquemini, Andre and Big Boy finally mastered something that they were already really good at, but just their differences and everything came together. I mean, just perfectly. Do you remember your experience listening to Aquemini for the first time, or like just that whole build up or whatnot? Because I have a whole lot, to say and a whole lot of memories about it.
I absolutely like. How about this, Mike? I remember this day,
Yeah.
like that day. I remember that day. I was a senior in high school. I remember the conversations, who I was with. How about this? I didn't even know Brand Nubian had dropped. I hopped in my man Rashad Frazier's car. He was playing track 2 on Brand Nubian. I said, that sounds like Preem. He said, this is the new Brand Nubian. You need to stop listening to the J and the Outkast so much already all day. Like I know you've been doing. And so the day was like that. Um, my reflection on Aquemini, I can remember talking to my guy Nasif outside of math class, our senior year, and he was like, "Coop." I'm pretty certain he's like, that's the best rap album I've ever heard, dude. He's like, you can't tell me necessarily that you heard a better rap album. He's like, Coop, because I was this guy even then. So he's like, Coop. Name something better than what you just heard. And I said the same thing I always said. I was like, well, there's Illmatic. He's like, that's all you got?
Yeah.
He was like, if Illmatic is all you got, he was like, then I'm right.
Hey, K Thompson's in the room. Salute, homie. He said, salute, homie. What's up, man? Salute to you as well. You know what? It's a whole lot. I know I was living in Atlanta, Georgia. I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia. So I remember just, Outkast, Goody Mob, whenever they came out with anything, Greg Street was on the radio, V103, and he would play their whole entire albums. I think he started that with, I feel like he started that with Soul Food. Because I think
Okay,
he
so
got on like in '95, I believe. You know what I'm saying? Like, so he wasn't here for Southern Playlistic. So it started with Soul Food, and I remember he played the whole album, ATLiens. I remember he played the whole album of Still Standing before it came out. And then when it was Aquemini's turn, I think the first song that I heard before the album even had a date was Skewered on the Barbie. Me being a Wu-Tang and Outkast fan, I was like, whoa. Um,
so hold on.
yeah.
So a few things when Aquemini is dropping. I'm in Charlotte. I'm going to West Charlotte High School. But what you're talking about, I got to see some of because I'm obviously was raised down here too, and I'm still running down here in the summer. So I'm hearing ATLiens get played on the radio.
Yeah.
Mike, I was leaving my job, work at Little Caesars Pizza with my boy Gary. It was like 1 o'clock in the morning, and the DJ in Charlotte played Skewered on the Bar. Like, this is way before I heard Rosa Parks. I was like, this was in the summertime,
Yeah.
Mike.
Yeah.
I was like, what?
Yeah, they threw that one out early,
I'm
man.
like,
Yeah.
what just happened? I'm like, what just happened? And so my excitement for Aquemini was all about that because I'm like you. Those are my two favorite groups coming together with some of my favorite members and getting on the track. And so super excited about that, Mike. But I think one of the beautiful things about Aquemini is I think for most people that talked about it, and I can remember that day, we all realized it was a classic that day. Like,
Oh yeah.
it wasn't, no, I need to hear this 2 or 3 times. It's like,
Nah.
that shit is gorgeous.
Yeah. Instant classics, and I've always believed in instant classics because of albums like that. Illmatic, Ready to Die. You don't need to listen to them a million times to know how special they are. I want to say that the Skew It on the Barbie video came out first, but they didn't play it a lot, so it was hard to really quantify like exactly when it came out. But I know Rosa Parks followed like right after it. One thing that's really noteworthy when it comes to Outkast's videos for Aquemini, the visuals weren't super impressive. Now I love Skew It on the Barbie because it was raw. You know what I'm saying? They were at the Tabernacle performing. This is when Dre kind of debuted the blonde wigs and ski boots and all that stuff because we hadn't seen him do any of that before that. He was more so turbans. I guess the closest thing we saw was what he had on Black Ice, which was just bright colored stuff. But this right here was like that introduction to what you were about to see. And I feel like at that time, Aquemini, listening to it, that whole notion where Dre talks about looking like the music, I think that's where they start getting there. I think they start getting to that point where they were already differentiating themselves from other Southern acts at the time with ATLians. But at that point, I don't think they had too much differentiated themselves from everybody in the pack. You know what I mean? Because I always say, and somebody on my personal page was saying today, that he feels like the Source gave Aquemini 5 mics because they didn't give the first 2 5. I don't know. I feel like the first one, Southern Playalistic, that could get 5. But if it didn't get 5 in 1994 and coming after Illmatic, which has set the tone, all that, I get that. But it's not getting 5 just because those two didn't. It's just a better record. Aquemini's a better album than Southern Playalistic and ATL. Go ahead.
Let's unpack a couple things right quick. The main reason Southern Playalistic didn't get 5 mics was because this album didn't get 5 mics, and they weren't about to do that. And so Illmatic comes out in April and gets 5 mics. Isn't Ready to Die like June?
I think so. I think that Southern Playalistic was late April as well. Let me fact check that while you're talking. Go ahead.
Yeah. Check the dates on those because I think like Southern Playalistic is closer to being a 5 mic album.
Yeah, that was April 26th.
Okay, so the week after.
Yeah, so it came out the week after Illmatic. They weren't going to give that 5.
No chance of that.
No. So
Mike, 5 mic albums in back-to-back weeks. They probably wouldn't even believe in what they were hearing.
And let's keep it real. I love Southern Playalistic, but Southern Playalistic shouldn't get the same rating that Illmatic gets the week after. Look, it should in a vacuum, but I can understand why it did.
It's a different type of 5 mic.
It is, but see, that's how I feel about Aquemini. Like I feel like Aquemini is a different 5 mic.
How about this? Plenty of albums got 5 mics before Illmatic mic, but for some reason Illmatic is the 5 mic album. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, we already kind of covered the fact that Illmatic is the page turner, right? Like everything before Illmatic is a different era.
Right.
Now I will say this, and I said this in the post where Lex Perry was talking about, I guess ATLians or Southern Playalistic should have gotten 5. I said the fact that, look, Dag, I just lost my train of thought real quick. Oh, this is what I said. I said that Aquemini, I feel like, is a mic better than Stillmatic and the Blueprint. But all 5 mics aren't created equal, like you said. You know what I'm saying? And that would be the same deal with Illmatic and Southern Playalistic. If they gave both of those 5, okay, Southern Playalistic deserved that 5, but Illmatic's just the better album. You know what I'm saying? And it is what it is. So unfortunately, it just can't. The timing was bad for Southern Playalistic. So that's why I probably didn't get that 5. But I don't feel like the Source went out there and gave Aquemini 5 to make up for that.
I mean, it's as flawless of a rap album that you will find from beginning to end. I mean, Mike, when the intro, like Mike, sometimes I just play the intro. Like sometimes I just play "Hold On, Be Strong," and like like everything on there is a moment. That's how strong the record is.
And for
Even the records they're not rapping on are moments, Mike. You know?
I think, well, somebody in the chat, I'm going to get to the chat real quick. Mike 100 says, I think it's one of the greatest albums. The sound, the energy, lyrics, songs, age like wine. A perfect album. Mike Davis from Tampa, Florida. Shout out to Mike Davis down there in Tampa, Florida. Okay. Now that he mentioned all those things.
Hold on.
Go ahead.
And you know what gets understated?
What's that?
About this album, for as revered as it is, Big Boy and Andre on this album are all-time great MCs, and that doesn't get discussed or talked about enough. We talk about Andre's verse on Aquemini, like both of the verses on Aquemini, but like lyrically, Mike, them from beginning to end, like that's his high-level MCing from a group that you're gonna find in the '90s, not named Wu-Tang.
Well, like, and you know, like you said, a lot of people like to harp on Andre and his performance because I do think that his performance was very breakthrough in a sense where he was showing people things as an artist that, you know, he hadn't really ventured into before. Even the little singing thing that he was doing on synthesizer, he had never done it.
Yeah, his gifts came out.
Yeah.
All his gifts came out. His tools started coming out.
But even with that being said, he took a couple songs off. And you know what I'm saying? And Big Boy is killing Slump. And then you get...
are stunning. Those are two of my favorite songs, Slump and West Savannah.
Yeah.
To me, that's where the album picks up like crazy steam and never loses it. It's right there on those records, actually. I told you, Synthesizer is the weakest record on there. And so, like, Slump and West Savannah is when it just, like, nope, it takes off.
Well, cops and robbers niggas be down to get them dollars and cents. Niggas done slump like baseball players when they shoulder their rent. Anything going, you ain't knowing how much money you spent. But in the real world, you're surrounded by these ladies and gents hanging around because you're buying all the weed and all the chicken. Feeding everybody with the smoking about when you broke no they was missing. Now you ride about 4 deep, starting to tear up your suspension. Baby mama on child support. My fault, forgot to mention. You ain't even have no checking account with thinking about no pension. Come on, man. Yeah, Big Boy doesn't get the credit he deserves when it comes to pulling together that perfect album. And like you said, and that lapse where, you know, an MC and Andre, you know, who's highly revered as he should be, and who is highly, you know, dominating in many of his appearances, he took a couple songs off. And like you said, the album created and maintained and even accelerated momentum.
No, it picks up speed on Slump in West Savannah. Like, that's when you really start riding to Aquemini.
That's when you're like, you know what, this is going somewhere, man. This is a classic.
That's when you realize it's going somewhere. Like, oh no, this is pretty epic, you know. And that's not to say that, like, you know, because the album starts off. I mean, there ain't too many better start offs than like Return of the Gangsta, Rosa Parks, Skew It on the Bar, Aquemini. Like, that's what I mean. It's rolling, Mike. But then by the time you get to Slump in West Savannah, you're like, hold on, I'm on track 8. No, this shit, like, all-time classic. It's starting to look like. And then it just keeps on going, like, and you're like, well, yeah.
Johnny Boy says, no, Aquemini is not the greatest hip-hop album. I want to know what albums people think are better than Aquemini and why. You know, we already got yours with Illmatic. I understand the why. I think one of the reasons why I give Aquemini so many high marks, we're talking about, 72 to 73 minutes long, right?
72, yeah.
Yeah, so 72 minutes long with no real mistakes in there. Like, just maintains greatness. And I think you said that you think Synthesizer is the weakest song on there. Yes. I think at some point I've thought it was one of my favorites. So it's not a weak song in that way. And it's probably the most experimental song on there. Is that fair to say?
That and Chunky Fire, but Chunky Fire is
crazy.
Yeah.
I think that I would say that Liberation, Spodiote, I mean, for the time, you know, I think that Spodiote and Liberation came across so well. We don't look at them as experimental, but they had never done anything like that before.
Not necessarily, but you weren't surprised when they did it because the first 2 albums had some tones and some songs that kind of drifted in that variety of making music in those manners. So you could see that.
Spodiote is spoken word, right?
Right, but couldn't you kind of like see that capability from just what you were seeing within the camp? That's what I mean. All the Big Groove interludes, and Peaches,
Society of Soul.
Right.
stuff. Yeah.
Enjoy doing the You May Die intro. You know what I'm saying?
Or even Funky Ride from Southern
Funky
Playalistic.
Ride from Southern
Yeah.
Playalistic, Growing Old, 13th Floor.
Yeah, but
You
I
know,
think the first time we actually heard electric guitars from them might have been Chunky Five. Am I wrong?
no, you're right. That would be it.
Yeah, like distorted electric guitars.
No, but it was one of the best endings to a rap album ever, too.
Yeah, Francisco Rodriguez says, "I feel like Aquemini is the album that you put first time Outkast listeners on or Southern Playalistic." I agree with that. I think that a first time Outkast listener, somebody who's never heard any of their work together as a unit, I think Aquemini is the one that you play them first. Would you agree to that?
Yes, if you're trying to make them a fan, but you want to know what the real fun thing would be to do for a listener that's never heard them before,
Start at Stankonia?
start at Stankonia and go in reverse. It would blow their minds.
Yeah,
Think about it. If you were to go from Stankonia, play them Stankonia, then play them Aquemini, and then play them AT Aliens, and then play them Southern Playalistic, they'd be like, no. Be like, yeah, I know that happened.
Lex P says, nah, AT Aliens. Now, I think I would possibly play AT Aliens last.
I would run it in reverse because of like the impact it would have on the listener about the growth of the artist. They'd be like, oh, really?
You know what? I can really, I can.
Listen, because if you're listening to, think about this. Think about Andre that you're hearing like on Miss Jackson, and then think about like the guy that's on Hootie Who on Southern Playalistic. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. The impact of playing them in reverse that it would have on the listener that's never heard it. Because all the music is impressive enough to play it first, if we're just being honest.
I agree, and I think I've said before that I feel like "Bombs Over Baghdad" is the Outkast song that encapsulates everything that this group has ever been about. But what I would be in fear of is if someone's not overly impressed with Stankonia. So maybe that's why I would start with Aquemini first, because that's the mind-blowing effort.
You want to know it's funny that you say that because, you know, Stankonia is really the album with the home runs.
It's the one with the home runs, and I think we kind of covered the fact that Outkast singles aren't their strongest records.
Except on this album. Because So Fresh, So Clean, Miss Jackson, and Bombs Over Baghdad, oh no, those are great
You're right.
singles.
Those are some of the strongest records. I think that where Stankonia fell flat is where Outkast is normally strong. And just the cohesiveness. I remember when I first heard Stankonia, I think I was disappointed by the lack of cohesiveness and just the fact that the skits and all that just seemed all over the place.
Coming back, too long. It was the first Outkast album that felt too long to me that I felt like they needed to edit some of it.
Right. And you know why it felt too long? And well, not felt too long. You know why I think that it was probably that long. I don't think they were really together on that. I really think that the last album that Outkast made together was Aquemini.
Well, I mean, when you got stuff like Questions on there, you know, like some of the stuff does seem. I can get what you're saying.
Humble Mumble sounds like two separate artists and two separate sessions.
I was actually thinking about Humble Mumble when you were saying all this. I thought about Questions and Humble Mumble.
Yeah.
And I love those records though, but those records are dope. And that's so here's part of it too. And that's what I'm saying. Like you're looking at Stankonia as like a hardcore and true like Outkast fan. If you just listen to it as like a casual listener, oh, they're not catching what we catching about Humble Mumble and Questions being on there. Like Questions is something Dre did one night while he was in the studio by himself. That's very apparent.
Let me ask you this about Stankonia. We'll get back to Aquemini in a second. But do you really feel like they are a group on Stankonia? Like, do you really feel like it's a duo? Because that's one of the reasons why I would actually go towards Aquemini first, because they feel like a group still, to me.
See, that's what I mean. I don't think the average person that would have never heard their stuff is going to catch a lot of the things that you're talking about. Yeah, they're not going to catch those things that you're talking about, but then they're going to see it as you go in reverse. Be like, oh, you know what I mean? Because if you go from Stankonia to Aquemini, like, no, there's enough home runs on Stankonia, and then you play them Aquemini, you're like, oh, well, that's just a beautiful, beautiful record.
Man, we got so many comments in the chat right now. I'm seeing The Great Adventures of Slick Rick. I'm seeing, yeah, of course, one of the greatest albums ever.
Yeah. Yeah,
I'm seeing also it takes a nation to hold us back.
it's up there. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the great. Listen, I think
If we're
there's a
talking impact, if we're talking
exactly
impact on culture, it takes a nation of millions to hold us back. But if we're talking about, and even on an executive, and listen to what I'm about to say,
talk about
like,
Paid in Full here too. Yes,
yeah, I mean, like, Paid in Full is a top 5 rap album, Mike. I would have it at
period.
number 4, number 5, period, point blank, and no lower. But Aquemini, Mike, and I even feel this way. I told you this, the difference, because I have Purple Tape at number 3, but the difference to me or those songs that we talked about, Mike. It's the
Yeah,
Liberation, the Chunky Fire, the Spodiote Dopalicious. It's like on Purple Tape, they're all in that chamber with Ray and Ghost, and they're all executing in that chamber perfectly. In Aquemini, they're all over the place, but it's so masterfully woven together.
yeah, definitely. And you don't even feel. And we were talking about this when Drake put out his album that felt like it had a lot of features, but really didn't. You don't feel like the whole Dungeon family's on this album, but they are. You know what I'm
Everybody,
saying?
yeah,
Plus Raekwon.
that's what I mean about how great they are on the mic. It still feels like their record because they're in full command
Oh yeah,
when they're
yeah.
on the
That's
mic.
you know what. That's the way it's got to be, and that's how I felt like about Supreme Clientele. Another one that we mentioned where we're talking about an album that had the whole crew on it, but the artist whose album it was in
Ghost album.
command every step of the way. And I don't give a fuck what y'all say. Ghost got the best verse on Buck 50. I don't care what anybody
Okay,
says.
that's not true. But
He
Ghost got
does.
total command in that album.
Tycho,
Ghost got
Night Glow,
total.
Velvet Pole, special effects, high tech armor, smirk you at the shows, supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, doses elevated fragilistic cali super. Cancun, catch me in the room eating grouper. Come on, man. He's doing things that other people can't do. I love Redman. You're not saying supercalifragilisticexpialidocious backwards in a rhyme. Come on, man. It's just, Jordan jump dunk like Clyde Drexler. Command. But yeah, back to that point though, you're right. I mean, Outkast had total command, and one of the reasons why I do hold Aquemini high, and I will say that I guess it's low point when it comes to all of the great hip hop albums ever made. It doesn't have that impact of some of these albums that people are mentioning, and I get that. And I'm not sure where that lack of impact comes from. Maybe it's the singles. Where do you think that lack of impact comes from? Because they're talking about Paid in Full. Obviously, the singles are
This is
impactful.
all the albums that they just named. All those other albums come from the Mecca. Even all the other albums that I have up here, with the exception of Doggy Style, Mike. Doggy Style and Aquemini.
So you think that the Aquemini doubters are New York bias?
I wouldn't even say New York bias. That's what I mean. Like they got classic albums that equate to Aquemini on a lot of levels that come from the Mecca. Like it Takes a Nation.
Mm-hmm.
Is one of the few albums that I feel on an executive production and song sequence and structure level is comparable to Aquemini. You can't say that about a lot of other classic rap albums. You can say that about It Takes a Nation of Millions. The Greatest Adventures of Slick Rick is one of the greatest rap albums of all time. Like, it's the
Definitely.
first rap album I heard from beginning to end. It's masterful. You know what I'm saying? It's still the best collection of stories that you'll ever find on one hip hop work. It's kind of a 101 in that regard. And so, like,
Yeah.
I get it, but also too, it's coming from the Mecca, so it's gonna hit different. And so I wouldn't say bias. I'm just saying like that's part of what's gonna happen
Right.
when classic shit comes from where hip hop was created. People are gonna pick those albums.
Francisco Rodriguez says Backbone killed his verse on Slump. You think that people
So
put on?
Breeze. So did Breeze. Like that.
I was gonna say.
Breeze verse is my favorite, actually.
I love Breeze verse. You know how I feel about Cool Breeze. It's one of my favorites, period. But to piggyback on that, I think that everyone upped up their level on the Kumina. I love Y'all Scared. I think that song really aged well. That's a song that back when the album came out, I mean, obviously I listened to the whole album, but that wasn't one of my go-tos on that album. But listening to it now, I mean, when you got Timo starting off a song strong, and then you got Gip coming in there, and then Dre just goes bananas. And then Big Boy comes through, and then Cujo closes it out. That's a no-brainer. You ain't topping. I think that's a very underrated posse cut. Are we gonna consider that a posse cut?
You want to know what? it's their first posse cut that didn't feel like it was made for consumption on some sort of level. It was just them getting down together one night is really how it feels now when you look back at it. Because when you look at the other joints, the other Goody Outkast joints, it's like, well, if we're not making that a single, that's going to be the B-side that everybody's playing anyway. Y'all Scared is the first kind of like, I wouldn't call it a street record, but kind of like that feel where it's like, nah, they didn't do that for us to really, like, you know what I mean? That's
It was in Goody Mob's chamber. That's what that was. And it was like, you know, it was taking on kind of like a cell therapy-esque, you know, I guess subject matter, for lack of a better term. You know, Dre came in there with Paragraph and Dent. I'm making 10 cents. Niggas on that Gil stock got dope. Hint, hint. At age 17, they start smoking Billy Clint. Now he's 21 and wants to know where the time went. It was kind of like a mixture of that whole get up, get out, and cell therapy thing. But I think that they were able to do those things collectively because Goody Mob, I guess you would say at that time, was very... They were two extremes, right? They were both very conscious in a sense where Goody Mob was a little bit more militant than Cass. Is that fair to say?
I would say more aware.
More aware. I think all of them were aware. I think they had their individual approaches to it. Where Goody Mob was a little bit more conspiracy theory in their music.
How about this? They were more expressive about the awareness. Would be maybe a more fair take of the pen.
Right.
You know about this because like Goody Mob's not gonna like is Goody Mob gonna give you Benz or Beamer? You feel what I'm saying?
Right.
Right.
Outkast knew how to balance it. You know what I mean? In a way where it was easily more consumption. I'm sorry, I can't even speak today. It was easier for consumption, and I think that's probably because you got two people as opposed to four, so it's a little easier to do that, and you're able to bounce off of each other. But I think Y'all Scared is one of those times where Outkast and Goody Mob got together and it was epic, and no one ever really talks about that because it's on such a heavily dense album.
Well, that's the thing about it. That's what makes Aquemini one of those albums that deserves to be in the conversation for greatest rap album of all time. Is when you have a record like Y'all Scared laying there,
right?
And frankly, for a lot of people, Mike, that might be like the 8th or 9th or 10th best record on this album. When Y'all Scared is like the 8th or 9th or 10th best record on your album, no, you have an all-time great rap album. Not just a classic, but an all-time great rap album, like up very high.
To speak to that, I saw a list. I forgot what publication put out this list, but it was the top hip-hop songs of all time or best hip-hop songs, greatest, something like that, however they worded it. And it was like a top 50, a top 100. And I think I remember seeing Rosa Parks like in the top 30 or 20. And I'm like, for me, that's not even top 10 on that album.
It is like 10.
I never listened to it. You know what? I don't want to say never listened to it. I only listen to Rosa Parks when I'm like listening to the album from beginning to end.
So Mike, here would be my question to you. What is the best record on Aquemini?
I was gonna ask you that. It changes all the time. I'm gonna say that. But off the top of my head, I would probably say The Art of Storytelling 2.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, off the top of my head, I'm probably going to Art of Storytelling 2. Yeah. What about you?
Mike, when I think about it, if we're going to put all the songs in a vacuum, I'm actually going to say that the actual record that bears the album's name is the best record, and that is the record Aquemini.
I'm not mad at that. I'm not mad at that at all.
Because Mike, you want to know what? I will say that's the one song that I was playing then when I was a senior in high school, and I'm still playing it now. Like when it comes on, I know what's coming.
Yeah.
And it still sounds like great to me every time. So I don't know. Like it's the most well-crafted record on what I feel like is the most well-crafted album of all time and the second best rap album of all time in my opinion.
Well, you know what? It definitely does have the best verse on the album. I think Dre's first verse on that album is probably the best verse on the album.
It's the two best verses on that album.
I love his last verse. And I love the theme that he was going for with the fact that he's Gemini and he was talking about, you know, Andre, this is Andre. He's basically talking to himself and all that. But I think it's so quick, and I think the style gets you. You know what I mean? Like my mind warps and bends, float the wind, count to 10, meet the twin, Andre Ben. But lyrically, that first verse is somewhere else, man.
Nah, but Mike, but he's cold on faith is what you make it. That's the hardest shit since
I understand. He's cold on everything.
He's lyrically there. Mike, that sounds like he's there. Sounds like he's there on it. Yeah,
What's Dre's worst verse on the album then? His weakest verse, since we're gonna go there.
Mike, there's
you know what I would say?
You're not about to get me in the gym. And I'm not shooting that shot today.
I think his weakest verse on that album, and it's not a weak verse, but I think it's an incomplete verse, and I think that one of those 16 ain't enough situations. I think Mamacita. I think he wanted to do a little bit more and didn't have a lot of room to do it.
Mike, if that's his weakest verse on now.
I'm just saying, that's how strong this album is. That's what I'm saying. Like, tell me an album that is this strong. And Illmatic, I'll give you that. Illmatic's 9 songs. The only reason I would put this above Illmatic is just creatively, I think it's somewhere else. Like you said offline, Illmatic might have better beats than this album, but this album is better produced.
Correct.
I think on a creative level, this album supersedes Illmatic in that way. Correct. Lyrically, I would give Illmatic the nod, but not by a whole lot. You know what I'm saying? So
let's talk about the impact part of it and why I personally had Illmatic ahead. And you probably know where I'm about to go because I go here all the time. Well, part of why Illmatic is because the themes are timeless. Listen to the names of the records.
No, you're right.
Lane, One Love, Represent, It Ain't Hard to Tell, The World Is Yours, Life's a Bitch, New York State of Mind. So you have a top tier MC of the highest order executing timeless themes. It's gonna live forever. And so all those things, so I do feel like Aquemini is better executively produced overall. I do feel like it's more creative. It is more ambitious. Like the records hit you, it's something hitting you that feels different. And this is what I mean about you can't necessarily say it's a bias all the time, because what Nas is on Illmatic is he's in pocket with what everything that you want hip hop to be on that album, and that's going to supersede all of that other stuff every time, because it goes down to the core and the fundamentals of what this shit is about, and that's what Illmatic is. And and even with all that being said, it's not like I have Aquemini like far behind. Like, I still think it's the second greatest rap album of all time, and I literally like there's not one album, and here's why I have it at number 2, because I realized, because I've been arguing about Illmatic and Aquemini literally since I had that conversation with Nasif the day this fucking album came out. Aquemini is the only album that I've actually been beaten in arguments about Illmatic about, because people will be like, well, Coop, it's this, and I'm like, well, yeah, it is.
It's 72 minutes.
It's longer and it's flawless, just like Illmatic. But that's one of the points that's been brought up. It's like, no, it's flawless just like Illmatic, but it's longer and it's got more, artistic integrity or a savoir-faire, so to speak.
It's 2 times the length, but one could also argue it's 2 times the MCs too. Gio says Big Boy put 50% in on that album. He was amazing. Of course he was amazing. And I think we talked about that earlier in the show. Y'all might not have been in the room yet, but when that album, when Andre sat out a slump and West Savannah, this album picked up momentum. West Savannah is one of the strong points of that album, by the way.
Mike, I still play West Savannah. Every time West Savannah comes on to this day, that was one of my favorite records. Mike, that was the record me and Nasif was talking about. That was the shit we was playing. I was like, what was you playing this morning? He was like, West Savannah. I was like, me too.
And that's the one that, when you talk about Illmatic and its timeless themes, if there's an if there's a song on there that I could just insert into Illmatic, it would be West Savannah.
Yeah. 9 in my hand.
Yeah.
In my watch. Man,
I really hope, I know they're putting out the big sleepover, Sleepy Brown and Big Boy, and they have a lot of great songs together. I want to holler at Big Boy so maybe we could talk, for that release. But I want to know what their favorite collaborations between them two are, because that song right there is magic to me. I think West Savannah is high. And the fact that they had that from the Southern Playalistic sessions and brought it back for that album, and we know how drastically different Outkast was from 94 to 98, and that didn't like sound out of place. It flowed. That's amazing. That lets you know how timeless that song was, is, and continues to be. I think it aged better than a lot of the songs on that album specifically.
It did. It did. It aged better than a lot of the singles, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And here's the thing about it. That's a testament to how great Big Boy was even early in getting overshadowed by Dre.
Well, Dre's always said, even on the first album, Big Boy was the star. Like, he was comfortable in himself. He knew where he was going. And for him to go out there, and I don't want to get on this soapbox on this show while we're praising, but for him to jump out there that early and do a song by himself with just 2 verses from Big Boy, and we have yet to hear that from Dre, that says a lot about where Big Boy was and still is as an individual, if we want to make them individuals.
I'm not doing that with you today.
We're not going to go there today. Listen, man, I'm praising Outkast in this incredible effort. All right, to kind of change speeds a little bit, the Source gave him 5 mics. I don't think anybody disagrees with any of that, right? But in that same issue of the Source, I'm sure you had it. Jay-Z's Volume 2, The Life and Times of Sean Carter, Hard Knock Life, received 4.5 mics. What do you think about that? What do you think about the fact that Volume 2 got 4.5 mics? Do you think that that was justified even then? Because I think now we all can kind of say that that might not have been a 4.5 mic album.
I mean, momentum definitely had a lot to do with the rating, because Can I Get It and Hard Knock Life were on the radio before this album dropped.
Can I read a little bit of the review real quick? Just to see if any of this stuff still stands as accurate?
Go ahead.
I'm going to put it on the screen real quick. I said, let's talk about comebacks. The exclusive phenomenon has become the holy grail for many of the returning hip-hop players. How many? Huh?
Comeback, that nigga went platinum on Volume 1, an imaginary player, and 1,000,001 questions, and Thunderstorm 98.
This is the narrative.
You Must Love Me, and Where I'm From are on Volume 1. What comeback are you talking about?
The narrative is that Volume 1 is weak.
Ass off.
The narrative is that Volume 1 is weak. Hold on. That's how they started this review out.
Man, this is like what Thought said on the start of The Tipping Point. Ain't it strange how the newspapers play with the language? I'm deprogramming y'all with uncut slang shit.
I'm sure the narrative gets further in. Let's go real quick. All right.
Very problematic that they talking that shit.
They said, let's talk about comebacks. The exclusive phenomenon has become the holy grail for many of the returning hip-hop players. How many all-star rookies earned permanent spots warming the bench on their second season? Now let's talk about Jay-Z, who, after winning a 1996 MVP with his debut Reasonable Doubt, put up less than championship numbers with In My Lifetime Volume 1. With the word comeback applied, a quick look at the songwriting credits for the truckload of hits over the past couple years proves that he hasn't gone anywhere. And despite the reception of Streets is Watching, the Streets kept watching and determined that despite obvious swings from the radio play, Bleachers, In My Lifetime Volume 1, Jay-Z never left. On the third try for the trophy, the mayor of Marcy Projects took time off in the offseason to perfect his method. With the production support from such diverse tracks such as Primo, Timbaland, Swiss Beats, Eric Sermon, among others, Jigga is off to the finals. No creatine, no Andro, and just a couple of formula and quality hip-hop.
Cut the beat off. I'm sorry. What?
Are they even going to talk about the album? Okay, here we go. Check mark the 45 Kings execution on Hard Knock Life. Only a true beat junkie would think of a sample of a song of Broadway musical. And only a real MC fiend would think of rhyming on it. Or for those who tend to think that a major leaguer don't battle, Peep the first verse from Stevie J's Lace Ride or Die. And let me know if it isn't raining hell on cats from Harlem. I probably made more money off your album than you. You see the respect I get every time I come through. Check it. Yo. They weren't even really reviewing this album. They even used space to talk about the quote. They even used a paragraph to use just the quote. Listen, man. We're going to get to what Talib said about them giving Black Star 3.5 in a second. And him kind of feeling like they slighted Black Star to quote unquote put them in their place. I think he's talking about the fact that Volume 2 got 4.5. And if that's where he's going with it, that's legit. What say you from what I just read and what we know of as Volume 2 and what it received in the same issue that Outkast as Aquemini got 5?
First of all, this is a 4-mic album.
Mm-hmm.
Been saying it for a long time. Said it when it came out. Said some of this stuff on here is a little okay, but very strong points. I'm gonna tell you what. A week ago with Too Short.
Dope. My favorite record on the album.
Mine too. Reservoir Dogs.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna tell you the single that has hold up. It's not Can I Get Up, and it's not Hard Knock Life. It's Nigga What Nigga Who. That shit's still hard. Yeah, but it's not the same impact or effect that it was. It was him at his peak and his pinnacle making his push, and not as an MC. When I say peak and pinnacle, I mean like of his stardom.
Yes.
Because what I mean when they're talking about don't call it a comeback, it's like the guy that I just heard rhyming in 97, 97 Hove, the dude that
people make songs about.
People make songs about.
It's phenomenal how the media can control the narrative and can make you think that somebody had fallen off when indeed they haven't. Because reading that, you would think that Reasonable Doubt got all the praise in the world in 1996. That's not the case. They gave it 4 months. Exactly. And now they're talking about the same publication. Respectfully, it's talking about...
No respect. Look here. You want to talk about somebody getting mics about the ratings that they didn't hand out before? That's why that album got 4.5 mics, because they literally shorted him a whole mic. They shorted him a whole mic the first time out.
And I want to go a step further.
Then they actually appropriately rated like Volume 1, which is a 4-mic album. And then he drops another 4-mic album, and you feel the need to give him 4.5 because you've given him 2 4s, knowing damn well he's rapping in a manner that people maybe later on in the future are going to make whole songs about wanting to rap like that guy that year. Fuck you.
I think you alluded to it earlier. I think you alluded to it earlier, man. There was a real big push for Jay-Z at this point, and this push is what got Jay-Z over the hump to where he is now. It was a real big push. Big was gone. They needed the next king in New York. He wanted it. There was a big push. I agree with you. I'm going to take it a step further. I don't think there's any way on earth they could have given this album 4.5 mics and then given Aquemini 4.5 mics. Them giving Jay 4.5 forced them to give Aquemini 5 mics in the same issue. You're not going to put that issue out because Jay wasn't going to get 4. They're not going to give him 4 for this.
I think you're thinking about it backwards. I think the fact that they knew that they had an undoubtable 5-mic album on their hands in Aquemini is what made them give Jay the 4.5 to keep it respectable for him.
No, I can agree with that too.
Because giving him the 4, because that's what I mean. Aquemini isn't like one of those 5s you talk about. And when I mean 5s you talk about, let me tell you like about a 5 that you talk about, like The Blueprint, Stillmatic, The Fix. No. Aquemini is not that.
Mm-mm.
And so they had an undoubtable 5 on their hands, but they had him making his push, and it's like, well, we can't give him a 4 and give them a 5.
You're right. Because again, they gave Reasonable Doubt 4, like you said. So this would have been
shame on him. Because you want to know what they did, Mike? They tried to dismiss him has misogynistic on Reasonable Doubt
Mm-hmm.
and docked him points for how he was talking on Cashmere Thoughts, but then they gave him Rhyme of the Month for Cashmere Thoughts. Hell, what are you doing? What are you doing? How are you going to dock him points for being misogynistic and then give him Rhyme of the Month when the quote ends, and I quote, "Life's short, so play hard and stick hard.
And the only time
only
you love
time
him.
you love him is when you dick hard."
Listen, I love the fact that we're having these conversations, kind of delving
Very
into
problematic.
some things that we just took for
This is
face
what I mean about how
value.
they play these games, Mike. You know how they play these games and mess with this culture? You want to know why he got 4 mics? Because they just got done giving It Was Written 4 mics, and they weren't about to give him 4 mics. Nah, this shit is very problematic what they've been doing.
I think you're right.
Ain't no thinking. We was
But
watching it happen, Mike, as kids. We was looking like, what is these niggas doing?
yeah, I mean, we're sitting here taking it for face value, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, the source was the Bible, and we're going to get to that from what Talib was saying earlier, too, about, you know, their rating in the source, because their album came out the same day as Volume 2, and Aquemini. Let me get back to what somebody said in the chat. I think it was Rodriguez. He asked, what's Big Boy's best verse? My favorite Big Boy verse is Mamacita, personally, but I don't know if that's his best verse. He went crazy on there.
Mike,
Love that
that's
verse.
my favorite Big Boy verse.
Yeah.
Like, Mike, that's the only song on that album where I might skip sometime just to get to Big Boy because the verse is snapping like that. Yeah, I'm with you on the Mamacita verse. That's my personal favorite too.
Andrew said, do y'all discuss Kanye and Mike Dean executive producing Ghostface's Supreme Clientele 2? We're going to get to that. We've been talking about that. We don't like the far out February 2022 date, but yeah, we're going to get to that. You know what? It's interesting that we delved into this a little bit more, read the review, and noticed that both of these albums are in the same issue, and just those background things. I don't know if I'm right or if you're right, but I think either one could be possible. Where, like you said, they knew they had to give Jay. No, they knew that this was getting 5. Right? But see, I'm under.
Here's the thing about it, because here's why they had an undoubtable 5. Oh, they had already given them 4.5 and 4, and Aquemini was clearly better put together than the previous 2 projects on a production and executive production level. They were stuck.
I think where we disagree is
put them in a corner.
I think where we disagree is I feel like they would have had no problem slighting Cass. They just couldn't slight Jay. You know what I'm saying? I don't think they would have had a problem slighting Cass, because if they slighted Cass, and I think that verse that Big Boy did on Skew It on the Barbie kind of put them on blast and let them know, like, look, we're watching. You know what I'm saying?
I think that Aquemini is the record that, like, really where they were like, no, we got to give it up. That's the give it up moment. That's where everything changed for the South. That's what I'm saying. Like, that record is like that. They didn't have a choice.
What I'm saying is, I feel like you said, what were they going to give Volume 2? They couldn't give Jay 4, right?
Playalistic, soul food, ATL is put you in a corner. Yeah, you keep on giving us 4s and 4.5.
No.
You're in a corner.
Yeah, you're right. I agree. It was a storm that was brewing, and it was like, it just pushed them over. But like you alluded to earlier, they just gave It Was Written 4, right?
Which wasn't appropriate. It's a 4.5. It's a 4.5. See what I mean? They fucking up from jump, because that's a 4.5. That's a 4.5, and Reasonable Doubt is a 5. Been fucking.
All right, so they gave Reasonable Doubt 4, and they gave It Was Written 4. And like you said, they weren't about to give Jay 4 again, so he had to get 4.5. With him getting 4.5.
Hold on. He won't be the greatest MC in the game coming out of Brooklyn, and he got 3 4s.
Yeah, exactly. They had to give him 4.5.
Look. When Big got a 4.5 and a 5, and Nas got a 5, a 4, and a 4.5.
Yeah, no. And then at that point, once Jigga gets 4.5, what are you gonna do with this Aquemini record? You can't give it 4.5 now. You're stuck. You're stuck. It had to get 5. What are you gonna do? Your credibility's on the line at this point. So yeah, they were forced to give Aquemini 5. It's a well-deserved 5 too, and I hate to say forced like that, like it wasn't deserved, It was well deserved. Now, I do want to dispel the notion that I hate to talk down on this album like I'm hating on it. I love ATLians, but ATLians is a 4.5 at best.
At best.
At best. It's
At best.
not the perfect album that people deem it to be. It's incredible. But
it's a brilliant hip hop record, Mike. That's what it is. It's a really great 4-mic album. If you told me that it was a 4.5, I would feel you because it really doesn't have any low moments. But it's not as masterful as people make it out to be. Like, how about this, Mike? Mainstream is dope, but it's not Y'all Scared.
It is not. It is not. And, you know, it's crazy you say that because I'll be hearing people talk about...
Decatur Song and Mainstream are not Y'all Scared.
Decatur Song is not Slump. It's not.
It's not.
It's not. And, you know, I love those records.
I love those records. And you want to know what it is, Mike? And I tell people, it's like... that album is really magnetic how it plays, like Two Dope Boys, ATLians, Wheels of Steel, Jazzy Bells, Elevators, Over the Woods, Babylon. No, they got you.
Mm-hmm.
They got you.
I love Over the Woods. I was just talking about Millennium the other day and how Millennium goes into Extraterrestrial. Those are special records.
Right. I love Millennium. Millennium's a personal favorite of mine, but that's also one of those records, Mike, put Millennium against next to, I don't know, either one of the art or storytellings.
You know, like I always, and I think I said this last week on our Thriller Purple Rain show. Let's put all the Aquemini songs and all the ATLian songs in one bag, and let's rank them from strongest to least. And where's Aquemini stuff and where's ATLian stuff gonna fall?
I'm gonna tell you what, ATLians fans don't want to do that, Mike, because after Elevators and Over the Woods and Babylon,
yeah, you about to get knocked out the box.
We're in trouble. We're in trouble after those 3 records. Those records gonna be up high, and you're in